Cross Guild is about to become a lot more powerful with the addition of multiple Shichibukai. Oda's concept for Cross Guild from the beginning was always to unite the former Shichibukai into a fully fledged Yonko crew, and right now we are only about halfway through the process. Oda is about to complete that process by the end of the Elbaf arc. There are several plot threads that are already set up such that by the start of the final war, Cross Guild will not only have a complete roster of former Shichibukai as its officers, it will also have the strongest army out of any Yonko crew, and Cross Guild will even have the ability to read the Poneglyphs to get to Laugh Tale. Let's break down how everything is about to come together for Cross Guild this arc. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. But first, if you want to get One Piece's beautiful islands for your walls, you can get any 2 island posters and get another 2 free and free shipping on our brand new site, onedreamstudio.com. And this month, we're also doing a huge giveaway. If you win, you can get the complete island posters collection for free. All you have to do is head over to the link below and just give us some feedback, and you will have a chance to win the complete island posters collection for free. The giveaway ends on September 16th, so sign up now. The winner will be drawn on stream. And we know how much you all enjoyed the island posters, but we've got something even bigger for you around the corner. What we've got next for you all is something you're not going to find anywhere else. Stay tuned. So that aside, to begin with, we know that Oda's route so far with Cross Guild has been bringing together former Shichibukai, and right now Oda has set up 2 major plot lines to bring more former Shichibukai into the fold. The first is of course Gecko Moria. Moria has been a loose former Shichibukai for some time, but there's evidence that Oda always planned for him to join Cross Guild. And with the recent reveal that Moria is a Kozuki from Wano, it is now practically guaranteed he will join. Before even getting to Moria's Kozuki heritage, we can see that in Oda's early drafts for Cross Guild that were revealed in Buggy's Vivre card, Perona was actually planned as one of the core members of the group. This makes a lot of sense as Perona lived with Mihawk for years, so it's likely that Oda's intent was that when the Shichibukai system dissolved, that Perona would have simply traveled alongside Mihawk to join Cross Guild. However, Oda went a slightly different route instead, saying that Perona is going to leave Mihawk and go find Moria. If we work backwards from what Oda's final goal was when initially planning Perona as part of Cross Guild, well, of course a lowly subordinate like Perona wasn't actually going to be one of the core pillars of this Yonko crew. Oda was likely going to use Perona as a setup to have Moria come join Cross Guild, thereby taking Cross Guild from 3 former Shichibukai to 4. Instead, Oda seems to have gone a slightly different route, but that will clearly lead to the same endpoint. What actually happens is that Perona doesn't stick with Mihawk to go join Cross Guild, instead she leaves to go find Moria before Cross Guild is even formed. Meanwhile, Moria is out trying to find his former crew members. The more we've learned in recent times, the more it seems that Moria genuinely cared for his former crew and has strong ties with them. Moria turns out to of course be too weak for the New World on his own and is captured immediately by the Blackbeard pirates, but he luckily manages to escape thanks to Garp's raid on Hachinosu. Where does that leave us? With Perona having rescued Moria and Moria nursing his wounds, having been shown yet again that he is too weak for the New World on his own. At the same time, over the past 2 years, Oda has set up a genuinely deep bond between Perona and Mihawk. Even if she won't admit it, over the 2-year timeskip, Mihawk and Zoro became like family to her. And now Mihawk is gone and joined a safe haven of his own in Cross Guild. So the natural next setup seems to be Perona finding a vulnerable Moria, the 2 of them knowing they cannot survive in the New World on their own, and Perona pointing Moria towards Cross Guild as the safest alliance to join. Essentially, Perona acts as a bridge character, with her bond with Moria and her bond with Mihawk, facilitating an easy addition of Moria to the Cross Guild alliance. It really is brilliant how organic the entire setup is on Oda's part. Of course Perona would pursue her father figure Moria when he's in danger, and to protect him from danger, of course she would bring him to her other guardian figure and friend, Mihawk, and his new group. And so completely organically, we have another Shichibukai being brought into the fold. But this wouldn't just be adding Moria to Cross Guild for the sake of checking off one more Shichibukai. No, this is where the real genius of Oda's writing comes in, as Moria's addition ticks off 2 extremely important needs for Cross Guild to compete in the race for One Piece. To begin with, now that Cross Guild is pursuing One Piece, the single biggest obstacle that every crew in pursuit of One Piece faces is how do we read the Poneglyphs? You can only get to the One Piece by being able to read the 4-road Poneglyphs, and for decades it seemed like the only character in the world with this ability was Nico Robin. who is now in the hands of the Straw Hat Pirates. Now in recent times, it's slowly been revealed that secretly there are other characters who can read the Poneglyphs as well, and these characters are also in the hands of other powerful factions. For instance, members of the Three-Eyed Tribe like Pudding can read the Poneglyphs, and Pudding is now in the hands of the Blackbeard Empire. Vegapunk can read the Poneglyphs, and Vegapunk is now in the hands of the world government. So between the Straw Hat Empire, the Blackbeard Empire, and the world government, that's 3 major rivals of Crossguild that all have the means to read the Poneglyphs, putting Crossguild desperately in need of some other mysterious figure that can read the Poneglyphs for them. And as if a gift from God, suddenly we get a miraculous reveal: Gecko Moria is actually Kozuki Moria. Although Moria was born in the West, he was raised in Wano as a Kozuki, presumably some adopted cousin of Odin's, and as we know, the Kozuki can read the Poneglyphs. That's a skill that has been passed down through their clan for centuries, going back to the Void Century. This hidden lineage of Moria makes him secretly one of the most valuable figures in the entire world, right alongside Nico Robin. So of course it makes sense why Moria would never have advertised this aspect of his past. Though interestingly, this reveal lines up with Moria's actions, explaining why he would have come to Wano to try to challenge Kaido directly when he would have had no chance of defeating him in battle. It was presumably to try and free his homeland. So bottom line, once Perona finds the defeated Moria and urges him to take shelter with Crossguild so that he can survive the coming war, as soon as Moria shows up at their doorstep and reveals that he can read the Poneglyphs, just like that, Moria will immediately be welcomed as one of Crossguild's core members. But that's not all. Moria also substantially increases Crossguild's military power. Not through his own personal strength, but rather through his ability, because Crossguild's other major need is an actual army. Much like killing him, Moria's Devil Fruit has one of the most important abilities in the story: the ability to create an entire army on one's own. And not just any army, it can be a genuinely top-tier army depending on the corpses that Moria is able to get his hands on. Right now, Crossguild's foot soldiers are just Buggy's fleet, and Buggy's fleet is extremely weak. It is essentially an army of fodder made from the early levels of Impel Down, and even though they did get new recruits over the time skip, it's established that Buggy's fleet never got any actually strong fighters. And this is further demonstrated by the fact that Buggy's entire fleet was about to be wiped out by literally the first batch of Marines that were sent to capture them. Buggy's fleet only survived because Crocodile swooped in and low-diffed the entire Marine forces for them by himself, meaning Buggy's fleet's military value is essentially 0. Crossguild's militia has genuinely no chance against the ridiculous infantry that some of the other factions in One Piece possess. However, Moria could single-handedly easily rectify this issue. Moria has had 2 years to collect shadows again, so his arsenal should be fine on that front. What's missing is the bodies to infuse those shadows into, and here again Oda may have dropped a hint as to the major play that Crossguild can make with Moria's ability. During Thriller Bark, Moria was obsessed with the potential of turning ancient giants into zombies. Moria believed that with bodies of this strength, he could become Pirate King. This is why he was so fixated on Oars and later Oars Jr. The potential of an army of ancient giants is something that many factions have obsessed over, in fact. The world government has been doing experiments for years to create ancient giant soldiers, and one of Kaido's most valuable assets in his army was the handful of ancient giants known as the Numbers. Now, of course, it would be too unfair if any one faction was actually able to create an entire army of ancient giants, right? Well, it turns out there is an entire treasure trove of ancient giants that have just been sitting there waiting to be used. The original Galila company, composed entirely of ancient giants, was frozen and preserved in Punk Hazard, and Oda made it clear that this is an important plot point that will come back into play later. And it seems like this very well could be through Moria. After all, this entire army of frozen ancient giants mirrors the plot of Thriller Bark. In Thriller Bark, Moria found one frozen ancient giant and turned him into the ultimate soldier. We know that Moria is about to be relevant in the story again, we know that this army of frozen ancient giant corpses is about to become relevant in the story again, and we know that Crossguild needs a stronger army. Adding it all together, it seems like Oda was planning all along for Moria to revive an army of frozen ancient giants. There are literally no other characters in One Piece that could make use of these corpses except for Moria, so this seems like an extremely safe bet. Ultimately, Moria may secretly have been the most valuable asset Crossguild could have hoped for all along, which is precisely why Oda was writing in the connecting character threads to bring Moria to Crossguild so far in advance. However, Moria alone isn't enough. At the end of the day, what matters most for a Yonko crew is the strength of its core officers. And it's been stressed repeatedly that Moria just isn't that capable as an individual fighter by New World standards. Even in the Marineford War, Moria was pitted against characters like 10th Division Commander Curio, or he was getting one-shot by Jinbei. If Crossguild is going to take on other Yonko crews, then it needs more fighters who can legitimately take on Yonko top commanders one-on-one. Enter Weevil. Weevil is clearly an extremely strong character. Not quite Admiral level in strength as he lost to Green Bull, but based on the hype that major characters give him, he must be on the level of Yonko's top commanders, drawing comparisons to a young Whitebeard even, and seemingly effortlessly decimating all of the former allies of the Whitebeard pirates. Considering Weevil was made a warlord literally without any crew backing him up, that speaks volumes to his individual strength and accomplishments as a solo menace in the New World. And here is where his storyline gets interesting. Whereas Oda has set things up for Moria's addition to Crossguild to be very easy and painless, with all it really taking is Perona finding Moria and bringing him to them, Weevil is another story. It seems with Weevil, Oda has set up a very exciting plot point for Crossguild, their first major battle. Since Crossguild's creation, the major conflict that Oda has been building up to for them has been a clash with the Marines, because at the moment Crossguild's primary enemies are not other Yonko crews. No, they've been building tension specifically with the Navy. Crossguild is, after all, founded by dedicated Marine haters, Crocodile and Mihawk. Crocodile has a long-standing hatred for the world government that surpasses even his rivalries with other pirates. And Mihawk was originally known as the Marine Hunter who would actively antagonize Marines. And since founding Crossguild, they've been going at the Marines directly, creating bounties for all famous Marines and trying to sow as much discord as possible among the Marine forces. So far, they've been wreaking absolute havoc on the Marine ranks, with prominent Marines being taken down left and right. And on the Marine side of things, they're making it clear that Crossguild has become the single biggest problem for them out of all the pirates, and that Crossguild absolutely has to be dealt with as the highest priority for the Marine forces, before the entire organization begins to fall apart. Crossguild hates the Marines hate Crossguild. Oda is clearly building up to a showdown between these two forces, and the only thing missing is the actual spark for the battle. And with Crossguild currently desperately in need of acquiring more strong fighters, and Weevil being one of the only unaffiliated Yonko commander level fighters in the New World, who was also kicked out of the Shichibukai and clearly in need of asylum, of course Weevil would be a top candidate for Crossguild to go after. And the beauty of it is that Weevil is not quite in prison yet. He's in transit in the hands of an admiral, Green Bull, meaning that the setup is there for Crossguild to execute essentially a great train robbery. Oda has needed to finally write a fight for Crossguild. He's been setting them up as focusing on going after the Marines. This is it. The first big play by Crossguild will be them swooping in to extract Weevil from the Marines before Weevil is taken to Impel Down. This would finally be our chance to see Mihawk in action against an actually strong opponent. And this would finally give Crossguild another strong fighter for their ranks. Another interesting byproduct of Crossguild gaining Weevil is that this would then make Crossguild begin to reflect the common strength hierarchy of a Yonko crew. We'll set the Straw Hats aside for the moment, as they aren't actually modeled after a Yonko crew. Their structure mirrors the Pirate King's crew that was defined by a captain and 2 wings. But for Yonko crews, traditionally there is a captain who is the Yonko level fighter and then 3 top commanders. Mihawk obviously represents Crossguild's Yonko level fighter, but now we can see how Oda is sort of filling out Crossguild's 3 commanders. To begin with, there are some striking similarities in Oda's preferences in character design when it comes to Yonko commanders. The first commander, or first mate, is often a more serious, dark figure, often intelligent and insightful, and interestingly is also often a smoker. This fits Crocodile very well. He is essentially the archetypical first commander type you would see on a Yonko crew. Of course, in terms of leadership, Crocodile is arguably the captain. Crossguild is his brainchild after all, but I'm just talking about traditional Yonko strength hierarchy here. And in that aspect, Crocodile fits the bill of a classic first commander. This makes sense, as most readers assume that Crocodile got a lot stronger over the timeskip, just as other pre-timeskip villains did. Now after that, when it comes to second commanders, we also see interesting commonalities where the second commander is usually a physically large and kind of round figure. Oda just seems to like that kind of design for the second commanders. And so along those lines, Weevil fits the bill perfectly. It's like Oda designed him to essentially be the third strongest of Crossguild after Mihawk and Crocodile, taking the symbolic spot of the Yonko second commander of the crew. So with Weevil joining, Crossguild all of a sudden would have a Yonko level fighter, a first commander level fighter, and a second commander level fighter. Crossguild would be nicely on its way to actually being able to go toe-to-toe with any other Yonko crew. Now the major spot it would be missing is of course a third commander to round out the group, and here is where it gets complicated. Many would argue that either Doflamingo or Boa Hancock should join next, but I am uncertain about both of these options. Just because a character was a former Shichibukai doesn't mean it automatically makes sense for them to join Cross Guild. Each character's own stories and personalities matter as well. For instance, Blackbeard, Law, and Jinbei are never going to be written to join Cross Guild just because they're former Shichibukai. Oda wouldn't go down that route with their stories. In that same vein, Doflamingo joining Cross Guild just doesn't make that much sense, as first of all, it would require breaking into Impel Down, which is an infinitely more difficult task than just attacking Weevil's transit ship on the way to Impel Down. Breaking into the Gates of Justice and subsequently all of Impel Down just to get Doflamingo seems like a wildly unnecessary move by Cross Guild. And more importantly, Doflamingo as a character just doesn't really fit in with the rest of them. Cross Guild so far is filled with morally gray characters. They're technically villains, but they're nowhere near the worst that One Piece has to offer. Crocodile is the only one here who is outright terrible for what he did to Alabasta, but honestly, we've already had multiple villains from the Alabasta incident who have been redeemed in a sense, and Oda has been slowly making Crocodile less of an outright villain over time. Other new members like Moria and Weevil would still fit Cross Guild's archetype of morally gray characters who aren't that evil in the grand scheme of things, but Doflamingo on the other hand would simply be wildly out of place with this group. Doflamingo is legitimately one of One Piece's most genuinely heinous characters ever, a slaver and genocidal maniac. While Cross Guild right now is filled with characters who are bad but you can still kind of root for, Doflamingo is a typical celestial dragon through and through. It would be like trying to root for Saturn or Charlos. Even in terms of group dynamics, Doflamingo just wouldn't fit in with Cross Guild. Right now, the real mastermind of Cross Guild is Crocodile, as Buggy is just the face, Mihawk is a bit more passive in terms of strategy, Moria isn't an imposing enough personality to take control, and Weevil doesn't really have a brain. But if Doflamingo were added in the mix, then he would most certainly butt heads with Crocodile, as he and Crocodile occupy the same character niche of wanting to take the reins and create a plan and agenda for the organization. On the other side of things, Boa Hancock hates all men aside from Luffy, so I'm not sure if she would actually join Cross Guild. We've of course seen Kuja pirate captains in the past join groups of men, but other Kuja pirates were never established to hate men as much as Hancock does. That seems to be a trait specific to her due to her past. As such, I don't know if she would break her usual stance and join up with a group of men, especially considering she believes that she can ally with Luffy if things get difficult. I'd still give Hancock a better chance at joining the crew than Doflamingo. However, it could even be argued that Cross Guild simply does not need a third commander, as Moria fits the bill. Again, Moria himself isn't at the level of a Yonko third commander in combat. We already have been shown this many times. And unlike other pre-time skip villains like Lucci or Crocodile, it doesn't seem as though Moria became stronger over the time skip either. However, Moria has always been about relying on the strength of his zombie creations more than himself. And if Moria is able to create an all-powerful army like we expect, then that in itself could make Moria enough of a threat that he counts as Cross Guild's third commander. So all things considered, by the end of this arc, we are likely looking at the emergence of a true Yonko crew that can contend for the One Piece. A Yonko level fighter in Mihawk, 3 commander level fighters in Crocodile, Weevil, and Moria, possibly the most powerful army of any Yonko empire, and the ability to read the road poneglyphs to boot. But let me know in the comments below what you think the final version of Cross Guild will look like, and if you enjoyed this video then definitely like and subscribe. And if you want to hear the real reason I believe Oda made Buggy the face of Cross Guild, you can listen to my weekly podcast that just dropped, by becoming a member or by supporting me on Patreon, link in the description below.